I really appreciate the people being here one time. Let's give it up for the people, baby. Yeah. Okay, we got an amazing topic. A couple of special guests. I will call them special guests, right? Cheers to them, right? I will bring them up later. So, what are we going to talk about? This country ever created, and who created the great on that? Because a lot of things that's not being discussed, and we want to hear from the people and from our panel today about how they feel about the civil rights movement. What I want to talk about is, why do blacks think that they're the only one that has been enslaved? Okay, still a little begging out there, and we're going to rectify that. We're going to rectify that. Okay, and we got a pop question today for a couple of whites and a couple of blacks. Man, welcome, John. Come on in the building, man. I really appreciate that, man. Come on in the building, brother. How are you, man?
Man, I'm good, but I wish I could lift 300, 400 pounds.
Oh, it's 600.
It's more like.
Oh, hey, what's up?
All
How's it
right,
going?
man.
Yeah, how you guys doing?
Amazing, man. Amazing, man. And we saved the best for last because if it's white, it's right. All right, let's welcome John. Another John, baby.
Hey, how we doing?
Amazing.
All right.
Let everyone know the last John is white. So, this is what I want to start with, guys. I want to start with who founded this greatest country. Was it white people or was it black people yourselves, right? So tell me, who do you think who founded this great country that we live in?
That's a good question. So, I can only go based on what I was taught in school. I haven't really dug outside of that. And then what I was taught in school was Christopher Columbus, right? That he founded the country, but I know that the Indians had it before it was taken over. That's as far as my education goes.
When you speak of the Indians, you mean the Native Americans?
Yeah, hopefully I'm not saying anything disrespectful, but I'm really not knowledgeable on this. But Native Americans.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. I had a Native American on my show, and he is the proudest when it comes to living in this country. So do you think? So you're saying white people did found this great country, right, and created this country?
Yes and no, but I'm gonna be honest. I actually just picked up this book, man. It's called The 0% Tax, and I read the first intro page to this morning, and I think it's going to get deeper than what I'm thinking, and it's basically going to tell you what America really is. So if you ask me again in about a month, I could probably give you a better answer.
Now, when we are asked these questions, I want you guys to really think of yourselves when it comes to this, because I want you to look at yourself, and I want it to come from you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Just putting that out there. John G, what about you, man? Do you think who founded this great country of America that we live in?
Hey, yeah. Yeah, like you said in the history books, we learned that it was discovered and founded by Christopher Columbus, and he's such a great guy, as we know. That was sarcasm. But yeah, just thinking about how America came to what it is today. We needed infrastructure. We needed in order to communicate and set up the original 13 colonies. And just thinking about the railroads, for example, those were all built by slaves, and without those, we wouldn't have been able to connect to different cities, get any type of communication or government set up in any type of way.
Well, you had to have some type of workers, right?
Yeah, exactly. And most of the times it was exploited by slaves and kind of stuff like that. But really, I just haven't really learned too much other than that. From my schooling, it's just you just hear about the big the bigwigs that started the government and kind of established things from there.
So let me ask you, John G, do you love your country? Do you love this country?
I like, yeah, definitely certain parts of it. I love, just living here, and I think I've been blessed with my circumstances. But yeah, things can change, especially in recent events. Just seems like we're on the decline more than ever right now. But just think something needs to change.
This great country that we live in.
Well, if he's speaking strictly about the United States of America, then you have to say the Europeans, right? But it's a matter of what perspective you're looking at it from. If you're looking at it from a white person perspective, you're going to say Christopher Columbus, which is a lie. But America doesn't exist. United States of America doesn't exist because it was never theirs. It was never white folks' country to begin with. It was stolen. So the country was never actually founded because the Europeans have no right to it.
Why do you say that?
Because they have no right to it because they weren't here. They're not the natives here. And they got it by way of raping, pillaging, and violence.
Well, they weren't doing it right over here. When that was going on, raping and all this stuff was going on in the Native Americans tribal thing anyway. That was going on anyhow. It wasn't foreign to them when it started happening. And people are under the impression that, see, the Christopher Columbus story is so tied up. It's so mixed up right now. They gave us an idea of how we should look at Christopher Columbus, when really it was some people behind his back that was doing some wild stuff that was part of his crew while he was taking care of some business elsewhere, and they was doing all types of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Messing up the people, pillaging and raping and stuff like that. But it was his peoples. So when he founded this country, he wanted everything to be cool. He wanted everything to be straight. But his peoples turned snake, just like you have people in the crew now that would turn against you and start creating their own rules, thinking, okay, I'm going to run this joint now while he ain't here. You know what I'm saying? But I want to move on to the Declaration of Independence. The people who wrote that, right?
Yeah, what about it?
About 17 days to do it. One thing that stuck out to me of the Declaration of Independence is that when it wrote, all men are created equal, that came from a white man. He wanted everything to be straight. So where did the hang up from the blacks saying, that we were 3/5 of a human and all this stuff? Where is that coming from when the Declaration of Independence came into play and said we are all equal? Why did we fall off? Why did we fall off from that?
Well, JP, are you aware of history? Like real, like legitimate history? You do understand that when the Constitution was written and they said that all men are created equal, that black folks were slaves at the moment. Well, at that time, right? You know that, right?
All black people?
I'm not going to say all, but we weren't considered free. We had to, in order for black people to be free in the United States at that time, we had to somehow gain freedom by way of whatever means necessary to to become free. We weren't just free because we were human beings. So when you say all men are equal, well, when white folks said all men are equal, how can they say that all men are equal, then later on say that we're 3/5 of a human?
But that's not written in the Declaration of Independence. If we go by the Declaration of Independence and have the right to bear arms, right now they're trying to take all that stuff away from us.
Right. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but the question that you asked was how, based on the Declaration of Independence, how did it get mixed up where now blacks are thinking that we're not free in this country, or we're 3/5 of a human being? But we've always been viewed by the white power structure as less than human. Even when they wrote the Declaration of Independence stating that all men are free, they didn't have black folks in mind when they wrote the Declaration of Independence. There's no possible way if we were enslaved at the moment. And when they said 3/5 of a human, that wasn't said during the Declaration of Independence. That was later on. So when they said 3/5 of a human, just think about that for a second. If they had that understanding later on in history, what the hell did they think about us in 1776?
So you said that basically they thought about the same thing, huh? That's where you're going?
Even worse. They thought we were animals. That's the reason why they would take our men, tie each one of our limbs up to the back of a horse, and then spank the back of a horse, all four of them, and make them run in opposite directions, ripping our body parts apart. They weren't doing that to their people. That's the reason why they had a pregnant woman. I think it was in Georgia, or South Carolina. It was one of them, where they had a pregnant woman. They hung her. Well, first they cut her open, her stomach, and watched her fetus fall to the ground, stomp on the fetus, and then hung her.
Where did you get that from?
You gotta read, brother. It's a real story. It happened in, I think it was in Georgia, either Georgia or South Carolina. It was one of the two states.
Do you think blacks, not all, but most, are animals in today's time?
No, I don't think we're animals in the sense that we're born animals. I think we have animalistic like behavior based on the conditions that was created in which we lived in. Yeah, we can have animalistic behavior. However, that is only based on the conditions that we've been subjected to since slavery, not because we're born that way.
So let me bring something to your attention, right? For black people that don't like to be in this country, they complain about it, they weep and holler, and they're just so unhappy about America. Why do you think they are forced to stay here?
Well, we're not forced to stay here. However, this is our home. We're not forced to stay here. We can move abroad, but this is our home. This is where we were born. This is where we were raised. This is where we've been at for the last, 500 years or so. This is where our ancestors have lived and died. That's why we're here. That's why we want to stay here. But that does not mean that we should accept the racial violence and the racial behavior that has been bestowed on us. That is crazy. White folks aren't doing that to themselves. They're not doing that to the Jews. They're not doing that to the Asians. Matter of fact, they're making laws for the Asians to protect them. And we're still waiting on a law specifically for black people. Where are the laws for black people to punish those for hate crimes? The Asians got a bill for hate crime. The homosexual community got a bill for hate crime, but blacks don't.
Because the blacks are hating on each other, so they don't need a bill. They can take care of itself. So why do you think black people need to wait on a bill when you see the destructive behavior in that group of people?
And as I stated earlier, the destructive behavior comes from the racism, the systemic racism that the white power structure has implemented in this country against black folks.
Okay.
Plain and simple. The reason why you don't see white folks doing these type of things is because they aren't raised in the same environments that we are raised in.
Point taken. You guys, I want to share something with you. Check this out.
The instrumental use of the history of slavery today also underlies the claim that slavery grew out of racism. For most of its long history, which includes most of the history of the human race, slavery was largely not the enslavement of racially different people, for the simple reason that only in recent centuries has either the technology or the wealth existed to go to another continent to get slaves and transport them en masse across an ocean. People were enslaved because they were vulnerable, not because of how they looked. The peoples of the Balkans were enslaved by fellow Europeans, as well as by the peoples of the Middle East, for at least 6 centuries before the first African was brought to the Western Hemisphere. Before the modern era, by and large, Europeans enslaved other Europeans, Asians enslaved other Asians, Africans enslaved other Africans, and the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere enslaved other indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. Slavery was not based on race, much less on theories about race. Only relatively late in history did enslavement across racial lines occur on such a scale as to promote an ideology of racism that outlasted the institution of slavery itself. Wherever a separate people were enslaved, they were disdained or despised, whether they were different by country, religion, caste, race, or tribe. In East Africa, the Maasai were feared slave raiders, and other African tribes, either alone or in conjunction with Arabs, enslaved their more vulnerable neighbors. As late as 1891, it was reported that Manyuema slavers had demoralized surrounding tribes, destroying crops, and famine reigned everywhere. Even in the early 20th century, Abyssinians were still raiding other Africans and carrying off slaves. It was 1922 before the British had gained sufficient control in Tanganyika to stamp out slavery there. Arabs were the leading slave raiders in East Africa, ranging over an area larger than all of Europe. The total number of slaves exported from East Africa during the 19th century has been estimated to be at least 2 million. The form in which the story of slavery has reached most people today has been along the lines of the best-selling book and widely watched television miniseries Roots by Alex Haley. Challenged on the historical accuracy of Roots, Haley said, "I tried to give my people a myth to live by. This instrumental use of history, or purported history, is open to the same objections as other instrumental myth-making."
Wow.
You probably know Vistaprint for business.
So, wow. Interesting.
Created by Roots during the era of the massive slave trade from West Africa, a white man was more likely to catch malaria in Africa than to catch slaves himself. The average life expectancy of a white man in the interior of sub-Saharan Africa at that time was less than 1 year. By and large, men from Europe or the Western Hemisphere came to the coasts of Africa, bought their slaves, and left as soon as possible. Even so, the death rates among the white crews of the ships carrying slaves to the Western Hemisphere were as high as the death rates among the slaves themselves. It was only much later, after quinine and other medical measures enabled Europeans to survive where there were tropical diseases, was it possible for them to invade Africa in force and establish empires there. But by then, the Atlantic slave trade had already been ended. During the era of that trade, Africa was largely ruled by Africans, who established the conditions under which slave sales took place. The crew of a slave ship was in no position to defy African rulers and their armies by going out across the land and capturing people willy-nilly. The stronger African peoples captured and enslaved the weaker peoples. The same pattern found over the centuries in Europe, Asia, the Western Hemisphere, and Polynesia. In Nyasaland, the Ngoni and Yao swaggered over and terrorized other tribes. In Uganda, the Baganda made life miserable for their neighbors. And the Nyoro and Hima of Anko enslaved Toro women and children. The Tutsi dominated the Hutu in Rwanda. The Maasai lorded it over the Kikuyu and Kamba. And the latter, in turn, held the Indorobo in a kind of serfdom. It was precisely the fact that Europeans, except for the Portuguese, seldom participated in the raids that captured and enslaved Africans that enabled most people in Europe and the Americas to remain oblivious to the traumatic experience that this was, with some Africans committing suicide to avoid capture and wives being whipped as they tried to cling to their husbands or children. Historian David Breon Davis pointed out that Europeans had little contact with the actual process of enslavement, and that as late as 1721, the Royal African Company asked its agents to investigate the modes of enslavement in the interior. Europeans typically saw only the end results, enslaved people being offered for sale on the coast. It was much the same story in the Ottoman Empire, where those who bought slaves had no idea what these slaves had been through before. The unique position of the Western world in the history, and especially the destruction of slavery, need not imply that there was unanimity within the West on this institution. In addition to whites who defended the enslavement of Africans on racial grounds, or who opposed general emancipation on social grounds, there were many whites, and even blacks, who defended slavery as a matter of self-interest as slave owners. Although most black owners of slaves in the United States were only nominal owners of members of their own families, there were thousands of other blacks in the antebellum South who were commercial slave owners, just like their white counterparts.
The blacks were showing them the way. They were showing them how to do it.
An estimated 1/3 of the free persons of color in New Orleans were slave owners, and thousands of these slave owners volunteered to fight for the Confederacy during the Civil War. Black slave owners were even more common in the Caribbean. In short, there were many defenders of slavery in the West, even in the 19th century. And outside the West, slavery was too widely accepted to require defense. No other nation ended slavery in the same way as the United States did, and few ended it after so short a struggle, as history is measured. How and why did slavery end in most of the world? There were two major processes. Over the centuries, as more and more territories around the world consolidated into nation-states with their own armies and navies, raiding those territories to capture and enslave the people who lived within them became more hazardous in itself, and also risked military retaliation against the countries from which the areas which remained subject to slave raiding over the centuries were primarily those where the people lived in smaller or weaker societies. Such societies continued to exist where it was difficult, for geographic or other reasons, to consolidate large areas under one government. This was true of the Balkans, the backwaters of Asia, and much of sub-Saharan Africa. By the early modern era, sub-Saharan Africa, with its numerous and severe geographic handicaps, was one of the last remaining areas from which vast numbers of people could be enslaved.
So then you have to check, hey, you know, if you want to look deeper into it, are you a part of sub-Saharan Africa DNA? And that would clear that up, because most of us, you know, that's.
Well, now that you share that,
huh?
Yeah, now that you share that, this information, yeah, I remember there's also an article where, it came out maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where this girl said her great grandfather like she's probably like my age, and she said she found out her great grandfather was a slave trader in Nigeria.
Yeah, you know. So
And they said the story was basically that yeah, he basically got the slaves. European men or Caucasian men would come get the slaves from him. At one point they went there and they just took some of his slaves without his permission, and then he actually went up to like, you know, one of the European countries to complain to the company that, yo, like, your men came and took my slaves
yeah,
without permission, and the company had to apologize to him, address the men, and give his slaves back.
you know what I'm saying? So in addition to that, slavery didn't come from no white people, man. They came from the blacks.
But what we would say now is that the way that the Caucasian people went about it was a little bit more abusive, because based on how slavery is really supposed to work is like, you're not supposed to like be a slave your whole line and your whole entire, you know, all your family is, you know, born a slave. Is like, maybe you're a slave for, you know, to pay off a debt. You know, maybe you might be a slave, but your child becomes to be able to be free. So it's like there's a little bit of leverage where you're not basically supposed to stay a slave your whole life, and your kids is born a slave and stay a slave. You know what I'm saying?
Now, let me ask you, why do you think that we keep up with that story? That we keep up with that slave mentality story? Why do you think we keep up with that? And we, from generation, we let our sons know, hey, you know, the white man ain't that good. Why do we keep up with that story?
I think it's trauma.
Trauma.
Well, this is the thing. So in different parts of the world, you had slavery, right? You had slavery in Europe, you had slavery in Africa, you had throughout the Mediterranean, you had slavery in different countries in Africa, the Caribbean. So you had slavery everywhere, even before the slavery actually came to America, right? But as the Christian consciousness said, the type of slavery that was here in America is something totally different than the slavery that was abroad. It's totally different, and it's more brutal.
Now?
Yes. Well, since when we came here, how they treated us when we came here, and even to this very day, it's just different. It's not as if we are in chains anymore, physically. We are in chains mentally. They still hold us as slaves mentally. And people get this whole what racism is and isn't. Racism is not the fact that a white man dislikes a black man and vice versa. That's not racism. If a white man calls a black man the N-word, that's not racism. We do agree with that, right? Mm-hmm. We do know there's a difference between racism and bigotry.
Yeah.
Okay. Bigotry is something emotional. It's a preconceived idea of someone, right? It's either a fear or a dislike of someone. Their look, their smell, the way they act or whatever, their culture or whatever, right? You have prejudice, you have bias, and you have bigotry. That's all separate from what racism is.
How?
Let me explain. And I went through this to you when we was on the last podcast. Mm-hmm. Racism is systemic. Racism has no emotions. Racism has no emotions.
So
racism is a device that one group of people puts on another group of people. Basically, you're controlling the reality of another group of people for your benefit.
Well,
I don't have to dislike you in order to exercise racism, because racism is not emotional. Racism is systemic, meaning there is a apparatus that is created or a condition that is created in which I subjugate you to and force you to live in a manner in which I want you to live. That is the race. That's racism. That doesn't mean I dislike you. I can love you, but that doesn't mean that I want to share power with you. That doesn't mean that I want you to be equal to me. I love you based on the fact that you are beneath me and I control you. That's why I love you. Not because I want to be equal with you, or I even view you as equal. That is racism.
And that's what you say is going on today, right?
It's been going on. Absolutely.
I think you're getting racism and discrimination mixed up. Now, let me ask you: is discrimination?
I never even mentioned discrimination.
I know. Is discrimination an act of choice, or is it racism?
Well, discrimination is more in the lines of prejudice.
So, if you had a top firm, right, and you want certain individuals to run your business, capable where you can trust those people, and they will make the numbers that you need for the profit margin that you need, and to turn out to be a successful business. Now, if Tyrone Biggums came in and Amber Woodlock came in, right? So and Amber Woodlock, you know her, you see her resume, it's stacked, look great. But whatchamacallit, Tyrone is giving it a try, and he's just a regular guy, no resume, no history of the job field, right? That he's applying for.
Okay.
So, what would be the best choice that you need to make to run your business?
You're going to choose the person that best or closely suits the position that you're looking for, who has the ability to do the job.
Now, Tyrone will walk away and he will call that racism. He would say, I walked in there, tried, man. They tried to hold me down, man. I tried to go in there, I had the resume and everything, dog. That sounds like them losers in our neighborhood who think that things should be given to them. That's not racism. This will be racism right here. Okay, because I've heard that. I've heard people say, yeah, they trying to hold me down, blah blah blah. No, you're not qualified for the job. That's not racism. Racism is this right here. If Amber and what was his name again? Tyrone.
What was Tyrone? Amber and Tyrone both applied for the job. They both have the skills, right? But Tyrone has his resume suits the position more because he has more experience, maybe even more certifications. That doesn't mean that Amber can't do it, because her resume is pretty good as well. If Tyrone hadn't even applied, then maybe Amber would have gotten the job. But because they both applied, Tyrone's resume supersedes hers. But Amber gets it because she looks like the hiring manager.
Well, check this out. There's been a new judge, a Supreme Court judge that has no credentials of in the Supreme Court. How do you feel about that? Her getting that job based on her color?
Look, man, the whole political system is bullshit. Okay, everything that you see is a facade. There's a bigger picture to it. Okay, so just because a black person we already had Clarence Thomas. We already had him on there, and he did nothing for black folks. Now you got a black female on there. She ain't gonna do nothing for black folks. There's an agenda for her being there. Okay, they're not going to put it on TV or in the news and tell us what it is. But so you understand is that To be a politician, you have to be a great bullshitter. That's number one. You cannot be a politician and not be a good bullshitter. That's the number one requisite.
I disagree with that because I'm running for office. I'm running for mayor.
Whatever.
You know
but trust me, this politics is set up for you to be a bullshitter because you cannot be in office and tell the truth.
Politics is chess.
You can't, huh?
Politics is chess.
Absolutely. Politics is chess. You cannot be just straightforward and do what you want to do because the actual power in politics is not the person that's in the seat.
Collective people.
That's not the power. Yeah. Like when Barack Obama was president, he's not power. The power is the power structure that put him in place.
So the people,
it's no.
If you go to the electoral college, we don't even really do it well.
So how Trump get in there then?
Money.
Well, you see, this is the thing about
politics. Put him in there, man. We put the Great White Hope in there, man.
This is the thing about
going there.
That's why they stole the election from him the last time.
Hey JP, I'm going to
guys. Look, we're running down because of time, right? Let me just ask y'all this real quick because we've been on here for about a half, and we gotta hurry up because of time. Okay. Two quick things, right? We're gonna run through this. Was the civil rights movement a mistake?
Was the civil rights movement a mistake?
Yeah.
Now, looking back at it, absolutely it was. It did more harm than good for Black folks. Yes, absolutely.
So, if you were a white guy, right? You were white. What advice would you give to the Black community?
Oh man, with the understanding that I have now as a Black man, I was just white though.
Yeah, tomorrow you woke up white.
The best advice I can give to Black people.
I mean, even without that, you see what's going on. I mean, you're a man of noble intention. So you know what's right and what's wrong.
Well, it's really not one thing, but if I had to pick one thing, it would be finance. It would be, gosh, they kind of go together. We would have to come together and pool our money together and create businesses and put in finance people. This again, politics, and because money finance politics. Money is what gets politicians in those offices. Black folks don't use their money to put the people in place in these offices to do the good that we need in our community.
But so there's mostly Black people that's already in there. So those Black people are just corrupt Black people?
No. No. You're missing the point. We're not pooling our money, which means that we're not putting our money together to get people in office who fits our agenda. Meaning, let's say police reform. We don't have nobody in office who is willing to fight that fight for us. We are not, like I mentioned earlier, where is the law for hate crime against unarmed Black men who being shot dead in the street? We have
by the police.
Unarmed.
That's such a small percentage.
But it still should be a hate crime still, whether it's a small percentage or not. Because remember, as I stated, you have a hate crime for Asians. Now go out there and call Asians or hit an Asian person.
That's what they're doing. They knocking Asians out. Black people are knocking Asians out.
Or call an Asian a derogatory name. Say something against the homosexual or the LBGTQ and all that. Say something against them and see what happened to you. See what happens. But you can call a black man the N-word and get away with it. Now, we may whip your ass, but I'm talking about legally. There's nothing that can be done to you. They don't care. For instance, go on, make a record and say the N-word, right? All they're going to do is blurt it out on a radio station. But remember when Jadakiss said something about the Jews in that Benjamin song, when he mentioned make money like the Hebrews, if you notice, they blurted it out even though he didn't say anything derogatory about that community. You can't mention them at all because they have the money and the power and the structure to do something about your ass.
Well, they probably ran that label.
They're running the world, man.
Ain't nobody running the world. It's a world that's being ran by someone. I mean, someone not pulling some evil strings behind.
If they're not running the world, then I dare you, and I challenge anybody. Go look at all of the major financial institutions in this country and abroad, and look at the head man in charge. We're talking about the banking institution. We're talking about Hollywood. We're talking about the FCC, the Federal Communication Commission. Go look at the head man in charge and tell me what he looks like. And then look at the person under him and tell me what he looks like.
But then again, those other people, other white people are on your side about those evil white people that's up there fucking both people up.
Nobody is on the side.
There's no difference between say that there are people up there pulling strings. Who was to say that only black people are getting affected by these strings? White people are getting affected by this stuff too.
Well, we live in a capitalistic society, man. So there's going to be rich and there's going to be poor, regardless of what gender or what race you are. That's just the nature of the beast when you're dealing with capitalism.
Right.
So that has nothing to do with it.
So how is racism how is it racism when everyone is getting affected by these people who's pulling these strings, which you may call them white because they look it?
Because white people, when it matters most, are going to get the benefit of the doubt over a black person strictly based on the fact that they're white. Period. And a lot of these white folks who got all this money in the United States, they're descendants of immigrants. They are descendants of immigrants who were given loans by the banking system to make a living while they was taking land from the Native Americans and denying blacks loans to build farms and get land for themselves. All this was happening at the same time. Who makes the decision? Who gets the loans? It's not black people. We're not in charge of the banking system or the financial system. We're not in charge. All you have to do is follow the money. Who's in charge of the money and the decision making? Those are the two things that you have to go look at. Who's in charge of the money and the decision? That's it. When you go see who's at the top of the food chain there, you won't see none. All of us are brown skin or light skin, whatever. You won't see none of our colors in those areas.
But you are aware that there's over 20 black owned banks, institutions. I mean banking.
20?
Yeah.
Just 20.
I mean, it'll grow.
There's 20.
But you can get a loan though.
There's 20 banks in within maybe our 15.
But isn't that good? Isn't that good though? I mean, isn't that good?
20. You know how many?
How much you need to say? You know what?
JP.
You know what? White people.
JP,
thank you.
JP, come on.
How much do you need?
JP, there's 50 states in the United States. There's 50 states here, and you're telling me we're making progress because we have 20?
Well, that's just in the banking world. Black people are running everything. They run the music. They run the.
No, we don't run. We do not run the music.
What's that guy that's running the Migos and Drake and all them, man? Man, you tripping.
Let me tell you something.
Is he their manager or is he in charge of the whole
Man,
corporation?
they the CEO.
Let me tell you something. The CEO of a record label is not in charge of the music. Who runs the FCC?
They do. They independent.
No. Who runs the FCC?
Who runs the FCC?
The Federal Communication Commission. They are responsible for what gets played on the radio, the internet, and TV.
That don't mean you need to go listen to it.
That means that they make the decisions if your music or if your message is going to be played for the masses. They control media.
There's good and evil, but the blacks tend to lead to evil.
No. I want you to go look. Okay, let me put it to you.
Just because they put it out there don't mean I'm gonna go ahead and go for it. No, I go ahead, but let me say this real quick, right? This black people always have this same saying. Nah, man, white people, man, they just go in the alley, man, dump the guns, man, and black people just get it, man. They come at night and they just dump the guns in the streets, man. I said, and black people really believe that shit. They really believe that the white people set them up like that.
Well, it's factual. Did you hear about this about 5 years ago when they were caught dropping off? They had, I think, a trailer full of Nikes or Air Jordans or something, and they dropped them off in the hood, and we stole them joints out of it. It's the same thing. If you put something of value or something that we deem valuable in the hood where people that doesn't have anything, what you think we're going to do, man? We don't have anything. We don't have
just like the blacks knew in slavery. They knew that they were weak-minded blacks. So they used them.
It's not about
they used them to get what they want.
Okay, so let's say they take the same thing, this trailer full of Jordans, and put them in an affluent white neighborhood. Do you think those rich white folks are going to take those?
No, they would have did the right thing. They would have did the right thing, which was find out how can we give these to a donation or a charitable case or something.
Exactly. That's because of the difference in mentality.
Right. So there's a moral.
It's not necessarily a black or white thing per se. It's just that the poor is black and the rich is white. Now, if you reversed it and white folks was in the same conditions as we were, and we were the uppity black folks, it would be the white people taking the Jordans out of that trailer. Period. It's the condition that the people are subjected to, which create that animalistic behavior. That's what it is. It doesn't matter really the color. It's just human nature. If you're starving, you're going to eat, bro. If you're starving and someone drops off the steak somewhere and they walk.
But that goes a long way. The reason why they starving, because you got to remember, that's why I wanted to touch on civil rights. We got to hurry up because of time. But that's why I want to touch on the civil rights. The woman agreed for the man to leave the house while she received the money. So while she's in there by herself, the kids are going to run out and be that hunger kid and be that wanting to have these things that other people had that they couldn't afford because they felt less fortunate. You know what I'm saying? And that was all stemming from the Democratic Party, and that's what people are not thinking of. The little friction starts in there. The little racism thing that you call, which is an evil thing. No such thing as racism. It's all about good and evil, right and wrong. So when those evil people made those laws against those people, hey, that's what you got. And you had other people, which were white, that were fighting against that, saying no, that's wrong. So sometimes we got to applaud those white people who stood for the blacks at that time.
That's a minority. That's a small group of white folks you're talking about, man.
No, I know no small group of white folks. It was black and white folks back then that was having each other's back. Look, before we go, John, I'm gonna ask you: if you were white, right, what advice would you give to the black community?
Put your money. Me or the other John?
Yeah, the other John.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a good question, man. I would say probably the same advice I would give anybody right now that I'm black, right? Because I would say I feel like I know a lot of people who make excuses for certain circumstances that you can get yourself out of. So stop making excuses for certain stuff when you get yourself out of a situation, you know. I think that's the advice I would give. Stop making excuses and just do what you gotta do. Take care of yours.
Yeah. And once you look at yourself, you stop the blaming. You realize that, hey, we all have the same problem. Whether you're this, whether you're that, everything, the battle that we're going through is right within us. We have the same problems. And no racism has affected anyone today, yesterday, or any other days, because they found a way to get what they want to get.
But I would.
Yeah, I'm saying it's true. One door closes, another door opens. And black people need to get over trying to take over something. They always try to take over something. Oh, if we ain't in charge, shit ain't together. Well, yes, they are. Do you see Chicago? They're ran, but that's a Democratic city, ran by blacks. You see Detroit? Same thing. You see Houston? Same thing. You see LA? Same thing. Ran by blacks. So those are black people that's in there that's making it. It's not, but in addition to that, if you love this country, show that you love it, you know. But guys, we're coming. In addition to that, guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate you. And I got something for the haters out there.
Motherfuckers be showing all that fake ass love. Keep that shit away from me. Keep that fake ass shit away from me, nigga. Before I explode on one of you bitches.
TV. Yeah, all I wanna was JPTV.